This is an article from ArmstrongEconomics.com, and it says you can clearly see why climate change is a fraud. Well, climate change is not a fraud. Climate change is real. The climate is changing, but the climate change agenda is a fraud. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video.
NordVPN is becoming more than just a VPN. Threat protection will guard your device against malicious websites, malware, trackers, and intrusive ads, even if you're not connected to a VPN server at the time. Step up your cybersecurity and stay safe.
Ready to hop in the 6-4 and cruise around the blocks? There's a storm coming to the underworld and the heat is on. Take over the blocks and call the shots. It's time to hustle or get hustled. What's it gonna be? Stay sharp. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. Don't let them catch you slipping. Only real gangsters thrive in the dope wars world.
Hi everybody, this is Crypto Rich, working with you to get rich with crypto, filling our pockets with crypto profits. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about climate change. I'm going to be referencing ArmstrongEconomics.com. I'll link to the article in the description below. And I do recommend you go and subscribe to the blog. It's a really great, entertaining blog with a mixture of all sorts of stuff. And before I continue, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, CryptoRichYT, join my official Telegram announcements channel, and please follow me on Odyssey, bit.ly/CryptoRichOdyssey. This is one of those videos that won't be on YouTube because of YouTube's censorship. Thank you, YouTube. All right, so this article was posted on November the 1st, and I'm going to go through it and make some comments as I do so. So Martin says, this is one of the oldest methods to brainwash a population that's known to ancient history. The high priests had discovered the cycle of heavens, and they would pretend to turn the sun dark, for they managed to calculate the cycles when an eclipse would take place. They would call people together and tell them what they would do. And then everybody would watch as the moon would block out the sun. And they all believed that the high priest could control the heavens. Today, astrology really comes from the Babylonians, who conducted a massive correlation study to predict the future. Now, pretty much we have the same thing going on with the great and the good telling us to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions. Otherwise, the whole world is going to die. And we're all going to be burnt to a cinder. There'll be no food or anything. Therefore, we have to reduce the carbon. Now, I am recording this on Sunday, the 20th of November, which is, I think, COP27 is finishing up. And this is also an article from ArmstrongEconomics.com, because COP27, the great and the good, 400 private jets arrive for the COP27 Climate Change Summit. Rules for thee, but not for me. The elites rushed to Egypt for the 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference, commonly known as COP27, to discuss how we, the plebeians, can suffer under the excuse of climate change. Sharm el-Sheikh's airport was renovated to accommodate these climate change pioneers, who arrived in over 400 private jets. A private jet can emit 2 tons of carbon dioxide in 1 hour, which creates 14 times the pollution per passenger compared to a commercial aircraft. Wow. So private jets, they're flying around telling us that we have to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions, we have to reduce our carbon footprint, while they're flying around in private jets. Now, this kind of reminds me about the rules around lockdown and masks. So they would wear masks for photo shoots, but when the cameras weren't around, they'd take the masks off. And they would tell us all to lock down and socially distance. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi is getting her haircut in a barber's that she's asked for them to open specially for her. And Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer are meeting up with their party cronies, telling us all to lock down in order to save Granny. Incidentally, because of the sanctions against Russia that Britain and Europe have imposed, Granny's going to freeze this year and nobody cares. Nobody cares about that. They're not manipulating us with that, like they did in the previous 2 winters about staying away and getting injected in order to save Granny. Now, it started off And Martin starts off by saying why climate change is a fraud. Well, climate change isn't a fraud. The climate change agenda is a fraud. The climate is always changing, just like the weather is always changing. And he goes on to say there is a cycle to everything. The climate always changes, and there are warming periods and cooling periods. These charlatans, WEF, Great Reset, corporations, governments, the Green Party, Just Stop Oil, all of them, they are no different than the Babylonian high priests pretending to block the sun with the moon on their command. Now, one of the things that the climate change advocates say is that the science is settled, that it's settled. Carbon dioxide and methane and greenhouse gases, they are warming the planet up. And they're going to warm everything up to a cinder and everybody's going to die and the science is settled. But wait a minute, that ain't science. Science is never, ever settled because it's always about the process of discovery. It's always about questioning. And even in the field of geology, they began to create great debates that perhaps the Earth simply burst into a catastrophic convulsion and that the planet was cyclical, not linear. And this view of sequential destructive upheavals at irregular intervals or cycles emerged during the 1700s. And then in 1832, Professor A. Bernardi argued that the North Polar ice cap had extended into the plains of Germany. Now, to support this theory, he pointed to the existence of huge boulders that have become known as erratics. And you can see a huge boulder there, Bernardi's erratics. This was a shocking theory because he suggested that these were pushed by the advancing ice. Now, this was a shocking theory, for it was certainly a non-linear view of natural history. Bernardi was thinking out of the box. However, in natural science, people listen and review theories, unlike in social science where theories are ignored if they challenge what people want to believe. In 1834, Johann von Carpenter argued that there were deep grooves cut into the alpine rock, concluding, as did Carl Schimper, that they were caused by an advancing ice age. Now, this body of knowledge has been completely ignored by the global warming climate change religious cult. They know nothing about nature or cycles, and they are completely ignorant of history, or even that it was the discovery of these ancient creatures who froze with food in their mouths. And they cannot explain these events, nor the vast amount of knowledge written by people who actually did research instead of trying to cloak an agenda in pretend science. Now, he has on his blog this chart which shows global temperatures going back to 2500 BC to 2015 AD. And these blue periods are cooling periods, mini ice ages, and these are interglacial periods when it was just really, really warm. And you can see here the peak of the Egyptian Empire, how much warmer it was, and the peak of the Roman Empire, and also here the peak of the British Empire. Our project has projected we are entering another grand minimum, which will overtake the sun beginning in 2020 and will last through the 2050s, resulting in diminished magnetism, infrequent sunspot production, and less UV radiation reaching the Earth. This all means we are facing a global cooling period on the planet that may span 31 to 43 years. Now, the last grand minimum event produced the mini ice age in the mid-17th century, known as the Maunder minimum. It occurred between 1645 and 1715 during a longer span of time when parts of the world became so cold that the period was called the Little Ice Age, which lasted from about 1300 to 1850. Now, as I have been learning about climate change myself, educating myself because I know the mainstream media and corporates and governments lie, and also I want to verify and not just take what they say just, without questioning it or anything, because if I did, well, I'd have got myself injected and I would have probably masked up and who knows what health, what condition my health would be. Now, I believe that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and Trump was an out-and-out racist and the worst thing ever, and Barack Obama was a peacemaker, which he clearly was not. So that's one of the reasons why I question, but also my job as a social worker is to question, is to investigate and investigate and investigate and dig in. So these are the climatic factors. These are the factors that I've discovered that make a difference to the climate. Solar cycles, solar radiation, cosmic radiation, lunar forces, outer planets, the rotation of the Earth, the magnetosphere, the tilt of the Earth, tectonic plates, earthquakes, volcanoes, the Beaufort Gyre, or gyre, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, trade winds, and ICTZ. Now, there may be other things as well. If there's anything else that I've missed out here that you think has an impact on the climate, let me know and I'll go and check that out as well, because that would support me and support me to support others. Let me know in the comments below. Most people have never heard of the Beaufort Gyre or gyre. a massive wind-driven current in the Arctic Ocean that actually has more influence over sea ice than anything we can throw into the atmosphere. The Beaufort Gyre has been regulating climate and sea ice formation for millennia. Recently, something has changed. It is not something that would create global warming, but it's something that threatens a new ice age. There is a normal cycle that appears to be about 5.4 years, where it reverses direction and spins counterclockwise, expelling ice and fresh water into the eastern Arctic Ocean and the North Atlantic. The 5.4-year cycle is interesting for its two pi cycle intervals of 8.6. This bit I don't understand. The immediate cycle has suddenly expanded to two 8.6-year intervals, bringing it to 17.2 years as we head into 2022. So this article, I assume, was written some time ago. What you must understand is that this Beaufort Gyre now holds as much fresh water as all of the Great Lakes combined. Why is that important? Well, salt water freezes at a lower temperature than 32 degrees, which is the temperature at which fresh water freezes. The difference between the air temperature and the freezing point of salt water is bigger than the difference between the air temperature and the freezing point of fresh water. This makes the ice with salt on it melt faster, which is why we salt the roads in an ice storm. Now think of the Beaufort Gyre as a carousel of ice and fresh water, because it is now spinning both faster and in its usual clockwise direction. It has been collecting more and more fresh water from three main sources: melting sea ice, runoff from the Arctic Ocean from Russian and North American rivers, and lower salt water coming in from the Bering Sea. Indeed, Yale has warned that this current could cool the climate in Europe, which is precisely what we are witnessing. Cyclically, the Beaufort Gyre will reverse direction, and when it does, the clear and present danger will be the natural expulsion of a massive amount of icy fresh water into the North Atlantic. Remember now that fresh water freezes faster than salt water. So what Martin is saying is that when it reverses direction, all this fresh water in the Beaufort Gyre that's spinning around will get ejected into the North Atlantic, and because it's fresh water, it will freeze at lower temperatures. Now, if we have more frozen water here, well, that's going to affect trade winds, which is going to affect the amount of heat that's transported onto land. This is not a theory. We have previous records of reversals in this cycle of the Beaufort Gyre from the 1960s and 1970s, where there was a surge of fresh Arctic water released into the North Atlantic that resulted in the water freezing. Now, there's been a lot of work done on this subject, which of course is ignored by the climate change agenda, because that only seeks to blame human activity. Nevertheless, AAAS, which is I think the American Association for the Advancement of Science, states plainly, Arctic sea ice affects climate on seasonal to decadal timescales, and models suggest that sea ice is essential for longer anomalies such as the Little Ice Age. Climate change is real. It is just not created by humans. And perhaps we are now at the tipping point, and they cannot keep saying that the extremely cold winter is also caused by CO2 and global warming. The collapse of the Gulf Stream has nothing to do with CO2. This may result in a major confrontation that these people have been seriously wrong, and what they're doing to the economy in trying to shut down fossil fuels at this point in time could result in tens of millions of deaths if the Gulf Stream collapses. Now, one of the things that I've noticed where I live in southeast England is that over the last couple of years, the wind has dropped. I live in a city that's on the coast, on a town that's on the southern coast of England, and I cycle around, so I notice the winds. And in the first lockdown summer, I was like, there's no wind, because it's always windy here. I know, because as a cyclist, I'm sensitive to the wind, but there's no wind like before. And I remember reports at the time saying how Europe was suffering from energy shortages because there hadn't been enough wind. Now, that would happen either if the Gulf Stream had changed direction, so it wasn't blowing over northwestern Europe, or if it had weakened significantly. Now, what's that got to do with carbon dioxide? Give me a break. But what that will lead to is significant cooling over the European landmass, because we're at the same latitude as Boston, but because of the Gulf Stream, we have much, much warmer and milder winters. Now, the other thing, I think Tom said this in my last interview with him, Tom Longer, that they are in a rush to get their Great Reset agenda, get it done quickly. One, because the whole thing's falling apart. It's such a massive project, and any project always has setbacks But a massive project like this, are you kidding? There's going to be so many setbacks, and there's growing opposition. So they have to deal with this project as it collapses and breaks apart here and there, and more resistance grows, and people become more and more awake by sharing this video so others can find out that carbon dioxide induced climate change is a scam. But also, they want to get it all set up, get us on a digital ID with a CBDC and a carbon tracker before the ice age grips us. That's where we're moving to, a mini ice age. And I base that upon stuff that I've looked at about what's happening with the sun. I think that the biggest source of energy on this planet is the sun. And if the sun reduces the amount of heat that is pouring out, then we're all going to suffer. And it's going through that cycle where the radiation that it sends out is lower and the amount of heat that it sends out is lower. Okay, if there's anything that I've missed out with regards to climate change and stuff, or something else you want me to have a look at, or some factor that I've not included, let me know in the description below. Please do share my videos, help my channel grow. bit.ly/CryptoRichOdyssey. Follow me on Twitter, CryptoRichYT. Join my official Telegram announcements channel, and I cover political issues and cryptos. And between now and when I see you next, please keep filling your pockets with sunshine. This is Crypto Rich signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.